expectations. So it is fascinating that psychiatry actually generates a lot of interest in various people. If I say that I'm a psychiatrist, the initial reaction could be that, wow, you read minds, right? That's the first reaction some of the people do have. But there are often other times where there is a kind of a stigma associated with psychiatry as well. And that may not be overtly expressed, it may be hidden, but it is palpably present in the society. Although the advanced societies perhaps don't share that much of a problem, there is still stigma over there too. So I want to kind of look at what is psychiatry as a medical discipline. Because medicine, particularly, we practice evidence-based medicine, isn't it? And we psychiatrists do the same as well. And how does evidence-based medicine apply to psychiatry? And I would also actually go back to the roots of what is the concept, conceptually, how does psychiatry stand? I believe that it is a science with foundation predominantly on subjective validation or subjective research rather than objective research. And I'll talk about it at a later time. And I wouldn't hesitate to accept this as the core attribute and practice psychiatry accordingly. So this may be seen as a self-reflection of psychiatry as a healthcare provider, psychiatry as a discipline, as a healthcare discipline. And what is the role of psychiatry in modern society according to other medical disciplines and general public and even the mental health practitioners? How do we, the practitioners, actually view the role of psychiatry to be? These are all interesting questions to look at. See, we have come a long way. It is beyond doubt that psychiatry and its practitioners have contributed enormously in the field of healthcare. And we have come a long way in bringing in the acceptance of mental well-being as an essential aspect of health in society. For instance, there were times when, particularly in the West, psychiatry was no more than putting patients far away from their homes into an asylum, and perhaps they wouldn't return back home anymore. And from that to having come to a situation where psychiatric hospitals evolved with treatments being provided in inpatients, outpatients, and later community psychiatry developed to the extent that hospitals only were seen to be place of last resort and avoidable in most situations. And the move is definitely towards how do we keep patients within the community, treat them well, and also offer rehabilitation while they are within their own homes and within their own communities. So if you look at it, this is a fascinating journey that psychiatry has gone through from where it was to where it is now. And it must be definitely put, the efforts are surely on one, findings in pharmacological areas, and also understanding how best mental health care can be delivered. Okay. And talking of stigma or awareness, we are doing our part in making sure that mental health awareness is on the up all the time. For instance, I have written a small booklet on mental health awareness in terms of diagnose the conditions and the treatment. And this I have written in Telugu so that it will be easily understood by the locals who I actually distribute the copy of the book free of cost. So yes, stopping the stigma is also very important. So we need to continue to kind of do this exercise so that our patients are not stigmatized and the branch is not stigmatized as well. Surely, a lot of celebrities have been helping the cause as well, just like how Michelle Obama has very nicely put that, just like how broken bones are to be fixed, broken minds, have to be fixed as well. There's no difference. They are all the same in terms of to be called as illness. There are conceptual challenges in psychiatry, and I can see that, but it's not to say that I'm in the game here of self-criticism. No, that's not what it is. As a psychiatrist, I am well placed in objectively analyzing where we are, and where do we stand in terms of meeting expectations of medical fraternity, meeting expectations of general public, and what is our potential, what else can we do in psychiatry. These are all important reflections, so I'll call it as self-reflections. So we may have conceptual challenges in areas of science, philosophy, and human rights as well. Science, for instance, the whole emphasis on what is the structure, as I said to you, structure of mind. I can't find it anatomically. And I can't do a blood test to find depression, for instance. So how does it apply? Philosophy, yes, there are possibly lots of philosophical viewpoints that are quite interesting. So there are overlaps there. And human rights, this is where, for instance, particularly in the West, a lot of people tend to get very upset when human rights are thought to be kind of violated in treatment of psychiatry. For instance, having to use Mental Health Act is one of those areas always which becomes a potential flashpoint between human rights activists and practitioners of mental health. So where does objective evidence apply in psychiatry? Where does it not apply, and where does it apply? So let us look at that. See, if you look at etiology as in the cause of depression, let's say I have somebody has developed diabetes, and I will say that this is so etiology happening in the pancreas area, or somebody has picked up Parkinson's disease. I can still say that, yeah, the basal ganglia is troubled, and therefore I can understand why that is happening. In psychiatry, we offer explanations based on biochemical mechanisms, as in neurochemicals like either the serotonin or noradrenaline or dopamine and such kind of things. So etiology wise, we may have a problem in terms of how do I objectively find evidence for the cause of a particular problem diagnosis. And pathology, I can't do microscopic examination or a histopathology and so on. It's not possible. So I won't be able to do some blood tests to pick up measures of how severe depression is, or whether I have been able to treat it or not yet, and so on. So that I can't do. The reasons are that the mind is in a subjective space, and the subjective space of mind makes it interesting in that objective methods of figuring out etiology, pathology, and investigations don't apply. However, when it comes to treatment, we have surely seen a lot of research studies, and this is definitely an area where treatment, evidence-based practice or objective evidence applies quite well. But what is evidence-based practice? See, evidence-based medicine is about the conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of current best evidence in making decisions about individual patients, right? And interestingly, psychiatry was possibly the first areas of medicine where evidence-based medicine was brought into effect. And so we all practice it. The approach essentially involves integrating individual clinical expertise with the best available evidence from current research. So we all value the emphasis on evidence-based medicine. And why is evidence-based practice so important? This is so because we have numbers to back our decision. We have numbers to back in the sense, I may do a study, and let's say I have done a meta-analysis on a particular topic. I can actually talk about, look, this is what the evidence says. So many number of people have benefited from this so and so medicine, isn't it? So we have numbers to back our decision, especially when we are explaining to patients. And we have guidelines to fall back on. So usually a lot of guidelines are prepared by various organizations that we are affiliated to. It helps us look confident and professional as well. You know, unlike the anecdotal experience, if I keep saying to the patients, in my experience, so and so patient actually kind of benefited from this medication. Fair enough, that may help to some extent, but actually it looks a lot more professional if we back ourselves with evidence-based findings. It makes our work more scientific, reassures patient and family. We can back ourselves in court of law, especially if somebody was to kind of challenge us. And it helps standardize care and decision making across the board. So we all may be practicing very similarly, and it helps in having a discussion and a dialogue. And you know, wherever we go, let's say for instance I move from one hospital to the other, when the practices are standardized, it surely is a lot more easier for us. However, critics of psychiatry would ask, as I earlier said, what is the basis for labeling something a disease? So there the question usually is depression just an emotional reaction? Why can't, how can it be a disease, for instance, you know? So it's a question of etiology. So surely that's something we have to, we have over a period of time conceptualized based on, for instance, a duration or the pattern of how patients actually present, isn't it? And how watertight are the diagnostic compartments, because there are some conditions which have overlapping symptoms, and how watertight are those diagnostic compartments if that is the case, and how reliable is your information to make a diagnosis. This is information bias. For instance, to make a diagnosis, I would be relying on patient's information or the informant's account. Or for instance, if the patient is actually admitted in the hospital, I would also be taking the nursing observations into account. I would be taking my own interview into account. This is how we actually arrive at a diagnosis and initiate treatment based on these things, as opposed to relying on investigations in the form of blood results or scanning and so on. They have their place to rule out any organic causes, but beyond that, for psychiatric manifestations, we still have to rely on information provided by another human being particularly, right? So there may be an information bias if that is the case. And some questions may be posed as to, do medications really work, particularly when the problem is social in nature. Like for instance, somebody is grieving for the loss of their loved one recently, or have lost their job recently. So it's a social issue. How do antidepressants work if that is the case, you know? So these are various questions that are posed generally in practice, and not just from from patients perspective. It could be from medical colleagues themselves. Sometimes those may be voiced out. A lot of times they are not voiced out, but mumbled upon. They may not be heard or as such. So sometimes diagnostic confusions do happen, and there is also a concern if we do medicalize social problems, you know. So where do we draw a line as to what is a social problem? When does it become a medical problem? And particularly if you look at the progression of conditions such as ADHD in the United States, there have been criticisms that, look, you are creating more criteria for mental illness that end up labeling different people as sick. So different people as in those who don't fall in the normal bell curve, and if they fall in the peripheries, they may be just considered as sick if that is the case. So that is a concern that is raised. It's not just about psychiatry, it could happen for our own kind of ways of looking at things in life as such. And there could be consequences with regards to healthcare, insurance, and judicial system and social welfare. These are more related to the affluent countries more so than particularly right now in India. There have been studies as to understanding the reliability of psychiatric diagnosis and what factors may affect. So this is an article from a magazine in Psychiatry in 2007. So there are patient factors, clinician factors, and assessment methodology related factors. Patient factors could be due to anxiety, memory problems, defense mechanisms. So change of psychiatric symptoms over time for the same patient, that may also happen. Clinician factors, depending on the style of interview, and therefore there could be bias according to that. Then assessment methodology, relying on observing the patient's behaviors, one, relying on proxy information in some cases, and psychiatric nomenclature and classification systems. So based on changes, they could be, that may affect the psychiatric diagnosis. So these are some of the factors which may affect the reliability of psychiatric diagnosis particularly, but it's not, again, as I said, it's just an understanding of the challenges that we have in the field of psychiatry, where we have to rely a lot on a subjective way of assessment, and objectivity only comes in a slightly different way, not in the form of blood results and so on, as I have said earlier. So yeah, I think we looked at this slide already, and I would skip this. So is psychiatry therefore on shaky grounds of the fact that I, as a psychiatrist, I'm actually talking about or the self-reflections of psychiatry? Does it therefore mean that that psychiatry is on shaky grounds? See, it depends on what the threat is. Has psychiatry been correctly defined, or does public perception overshadow the definition? For instance, if the public perception has a different viewpoint of what psychiatry should be like, are we delivering what they want? Is their expectation realistic? All these things actually may be important. So let's look at them as we discuss. It'll be more apparent. So has psychiatry been correctly defined? I would define psychiatry as follows. It is the field of medical sciences that deals with assessing and diagnosing the illness of the mind and treating the illness. It is that field which promotes holistic view in understanding and treating the illness. Now, this is very important, and it differs with compared to the other medical branches. Here, we take into account biological, psychological, and social factors. And I also propose in another talk that we have to take into account spiritual factors as well into the holistic way of understanding psychiatry. Hence, it incorporates the concept of multidisciplinary teamwork to practice the holistic approach. See, if I say there are biological factors, there are doctors and nurses. Then if I say psychological factors, there is a psychologist in the team. And if I say there are social factors, there is a medical social worker. There could be occupational therapist. Okay. So we have a lot of different people involved in the care of patient, and it works extremely well. It works extremely well in really meeting the patient needs. And one of the concepts we have in psychiatry is called as patient-centered care. And the reason why patient-centered care became a buzzword is because that particular patient, for us as a doctor, perhaps depression as a diagnosis and treating it could be my prime importance. But for that patient, it could be a psychological factor in terms of their own upbringing and how it shaped their mind state as such. That could be their own important factor, right? So if we look at patient-centered care, a psychologist may actually be playing a bigger role in meeting the needs of that particular patient. Or another patient, it could be family relationships, or it could be social issues such as finance or job, such kind of things. If that is the case, a social worker may also be of primary importance. So patient-centered care is extremely valuable in the field of psychiatry. There may be gaps in definition, but that's something we learn to live with, and psychiatry is an ever-absorbing and ever-evolving field. And that's where it actually kind of works well in healing process, healing emotional issues, and also practical problem solving of a lot of other issues that a patient may come with. However, perception of psychiatry is something which is of concern, not just outside medical fraternity, within the medical fraternity as well. So BMJ, British Medical Journal, in 2014 had this article, "Why don't many doctors choose a career in psychiatry?" And this article reported findings of a survey that a significant proportion of medical students and general public had negative views of psychiatry, thus possibly explaining why few trainees opt for psychiatry training. And these are things to look at as to why this is happening. Then there is another article from ACTA Psychiatry Scandinavia, which says 90% of medical teaching faculty felt psychiatrists were not good role models for medical students. Now, I can easily say that this must be quite a perception bias. A perception bias which is based on not interacting between colleagues. And we are open to talk about it as psychiatrists, but this may be happening in other medical branches as well. How open are we in talking between the disciplines? We may be talking within the discipline, intradisciplinary interaction is possibly happening, but what about interdisciplinary interaction? Because I guess that this is where it comes from, that because there is hardly much of interaction, the perception therefore stays at how I would think that pre-medical days, if they have joined medical, whatever their pre-medical viewpoint has been, it may still be carrying on, because unless there is the openness to accept something, it may not actually even come at a much later time. And sometimes some of the viewpoints may only become more rigid and hurt more rather than do good. So this is an area which, as psychiatrists, we actually would think that other medical branches need to open up a little more in how they view psychiatry and the importance of psychiatrists. In a review of 22 studies comparing attitudes of mental health professionals and general public, only 6 studies found the professionals were less stigmatizing than the public, with 9 showing no difference and 7 suggesting that professionals had more negative attitudes. Again, it's a complex issue. Once you enter in, we know what are the challenges, what are the limitations, what are the strengths. And perhaps we are a lot more open about talking about these issues as well. And is psychiatry an art or a science? Views of psychiatrists and trainees. So it says the tension that exists within the profession's identity as a discipline has important implications for teaching, learning, and clinical and research practices. And unless these are openly discussed, it's almost like not to be in a state of denial. A state of denial actually hurts more than does any good. And if we actually openly kind of discuss some of these challenges, then we are more at ease of what we represent and what are the expectations from the others. In fact, sometimes I wonder, how challenging is it for me to explain to other medical colleagues, colleagues from other medical branches, what psychiatry can do and what psychiatry isn't uh, designed to do. I was there for an interview once in Bombay, one of the big hospitals there, while I was still in UK at that time. And I was actually surprised to see the surgical colleagues seeing psychiatrists as somebody only to uh, do consenting for their surgeries. And actually, that saddened me to some extent, because that is the viewpoint that they have had of psychiatrists. That would you be doing consenting for our patients who need surgery? So no, psychiatry isn't about that at all. Psychiatry is about treating illnesses, and psychiatrists actually do a lot good effort, put a lot good effort in actually kind of listening to patients. The listening skills are very important in psychiatry. And um, so there's lot to do in terms of patients' illnesses and well-being. The other aspects are overlaps, and surely psychiatrists would be happy to help, but there should be a better understanding of what we represent, rather than have a perception issue which leads to only kind of stigma, enhancing, or uh, the stigma just continues to stay. So what does a psychiatrist feel because of all these challenges? Fighting the criticism or accepting the criticism? If I fight criticism, I should fight criticism. If it is not understood, if a psychiatrist's role is not properly understood, or psychiatry is not properly understood, and if there is an unfair portrayal, like movies, for instance, and how unfortunately some of the movies, even with big film stars, portray psychiatric patients in a very sad light, and psychiatric treatment is often demonstrated to be a barbaric kind of adventure. And it saddens, because there is absolutely no effort made by the producers of these films or the makers of the movie to actually go down to a place of mental health practice, to really see or learn from the practitioners what exactly happens. So there is unfair portrayal, and that is because of prejudice again. That is because either there is no will to learn what actually happens within the field of psychiatry, because it is an area, somehow it's a no-go area even today for a lot of people, unless they have some pressing problem. So efforts, are they valued? See, results can't be often quantified. So if, let us say, we have resolved a family situation, if we rehabilitated a patient who has schizophrenia well enough for them to find a job, you know, or they are able to actually do their own household activities, that is a result for us. That's a fantastic result for us. But can I quantify it? Can I actually give a number on a blood test, like a blood test report? That is not going to be the case, right? So how valuable are those findings? They are valuable for us, particularly valuable for the clients and the families as well. And sometimes outright negative comments can be very humiliating as well. Labeling psychiatrists and labeling psychiatry is still not uncommon, and it can be considered as a joke sometimes, but the intent is very clear. There is no effort to kind of develop that samadrishti, as we call it, the equanimity, the equal way of looking at things. So accepting the criticism, one way to kind of do a better job is to accept the criticism in enhancing our image among medical family. enhance image among general public, value ourselves, accept our limitations, and do our best within the scope of our limitations. I think we can definitely work well within the limitations. One of the challenges I have come across, especially having been sitting in grand wardrooms in whether it was in Singapore or UK and recently here, is that we have this burden on us trying to kind of prove the objectivity as such. I don't think we should really worry about having to prove objectivity. Where we have strengths, we definitely need to work there more rather than worry about those areas which are beyond us. So assessment is where the strength is in me and you, everybody basically, and no lab is going to help us. So we need to really look at our own interview styles with open and closed questions using standardized interviewing techniques. We need to make sure that everyone, particularly the trainees, understand the concepts of psychophenomenology very well, psychopathology. And we need to really do a very good job of gathering and verifying information from all possible sources and have good observations. And that's where that's our strength. That is our strength to make an assessment. There's no role for a lab over there apart from ruling out organic causes most of the time. And diagnosis, yes, our classification systems keep revising, like the DSM-5 has come up recently and so on. And management, research, whether it is local and global, both are applicable for us. Meta-analysis, guidelines, and so on. See, psychiatry and medicine, how is the relation there? There can be some cherry picking which puts psychiatry at a disadvantage. And what is cherry picking? Let's say, for instance, there are areas of overlap. Assuming, for instance, that a particular condition has an objective evidence and most likely the one's particular diagnosis, like for instance, dementia. If dementia or Alzheimer's disease has a stronger basis, neurological basis, then it may actually shift away from psychiatry into neurology. And that's how it happens. It may happen in other areas as well. And sometimes I've seen particularly that when the dementia is quite severe and the psychological symptoms or the behavioral symptoms present, and that is when the patients are sent to psychiatrists. Okay, so this is how cherry picking can happen, especially when there are overlapping areas. Why does it happen? This is because the other medical specialties have a positive image. There is absolutely no stigma or lesser stigma on them. And there is a foundation on objective science, right, relatively. So this is where the challenge lies in terms of overlaps with other medical specialties. We often see patients actually do rounds with other specialties before they end up with us. For instance, somebody with anxiety disorder may initially go to a cardiologist because they have palpitations, and they may be treated with psychiatric medications as well, but they may finally come to a psychiatrist. Similarly, somebody with anxiety or some depression may present with somatic symptoms, like for instance, may present to orthopedician because of pains, or GI symptoms to a gastroenterologist, or with the migrainous headaches and such kind to neurologists. You can see that because of the overlap, patients may actually go to different specialties. And when they go to different specialties, it may be a good idea to, one, either make sure that the psychiatric problems are fully addressed because any doctor can actually identify, diagnose psychiatric issues. It doesn't have to be a psychiatrist, right? So if others are able to do that, but the only thing is that time has to be spent. Time has to be spent in understanding the details of what is happening. So as I rightly said earlier, the biopsychosocial model is applied to the patient, and it's not always the pure biological model that has to apply. But on the other hand, if it is recognized that this is a psychiatric problem, it surely would be a good idea to refer to the psychiatrist immediately so that wholesome treatment can actually take place with a psychiatrist. Just like how a psychiatrist, if we identify any particular orthopedic problems or such kind, we would refer to other specialties. I think it's in the best interest of the patient at the end of the day. But having said that, it should be a collaborative approach at the end. At the end of the day, there's hardly anything stopping us from picking up a phone or messaging to discuss with our medical colleagues. So what about the whole definition of psychiatry? Has psychiatry been defined properly? Yeah. So modern psychiatry, with its predominant biological domain, is firmly in the family of medical sciences. But it has evolved to embrace holistic approach in view of the heterogeneity in understanding and treating the illness. See, the medical treatment model actually works very well, whether it is the neurotic disorders or it is the psychotic disorders. And we also have psychological therapeutic models as well to help the patients. So what is that core feature of psychiatry if I was to search for it? I would think that, in my observation, psychiatry is somewhat preoccupied with objective research. So we are also kind of somehow focusing a bit too much on objective research, trying to look for a gene or such kind of research, for instance, CSF fluids or neurological neuroimaging and so on. They have their place, but because if we are focused too much on them, then we may miss the whole essence or the crux of the subjective experience of subjective research, because that is where psychiatry actually truly lies, the subjective experience of the patient and the clinician. If the mind is in subjective space, then by inference, all research in relation to the study of mind would be subjective too. So we should be doing objective research, that's perfectly good. But we should also pay more attention to subjective research. So if subjectivity is the core feature, is evidence-based practice compatible with psychiatry? Of course it is, because we need to look at how do we conduct subjective research much better. We need to find ways to replicate subjective experiences in larger number of patients. The power of the study needs to increase. And we can also look at how do we quantify subjective experiences. A simple example would be the pain scale, isn't it? Catching the emotion of pain in a number. Similarly, can we do that? Or similar exercises quantifying the subjective experiences. However, we need to accept that this will never be the same as objective evidence. So there are other challenges or challenges in the sense it's a dual process of challenge and benefit. See, modern world is definitely one happy family. And in the era of globalization, cultural and linguistic homogenization is a reality as our tastes and preferences are becoming homogeneous. So for instance, we are all using the same language, whether it's at home or work. I think a couple of generations later, maybe we'll be a lot more globalized. Everybody seems to be talking the same language then. Clothes we wear are almost same wherever we go. And we are entertaining ourselves the same way. And even the mannerisms and etiquette are also changing or becoming globalized. Which is better? Is it cultural homogenization or cultural osmosis? See, cultural homogenization is at the expectation that we need to let go of whatever we hold on natively or locally. Whereas cultural osmosis is we still retain whatever is local, but we absorb new important findings, right? So globalized world should be open to learn from all directions while respecting and valuing the source of knowledge in its true shape. Globalized psychiatry, therefore, globally applicable model of psychiatry has several advantages. For instance, the uniform categorization of diagnosis and finding solutions together for common problems, like for instance, the anti-stigma campaign and such kind of things. However, the risks are that we may dismiss the local cultural differences. And how true are we in evolving? I'm only talking of psychiatry, but it could refer to any other medical specialty too. How good are we in evolving our own branch, our own medical understanding, based on what we have, what we inherit as our own cultural strength, for instance. Okay, that is very important as well, and research has to be done on that too. So unique local cultural, social, and political features are still significant in shaping behavior, cognition, and emotion. See, one way to overcome is to train psychiatric clinicians in nuances of native wisdom, culture, and faiths. There are, there's a bank which says the slogan uses the slogan, the world's local bank. So it's a global bank, but it likes to be called as a local bank. Similarly, we may be globalized, but we should retain our nativity as well. So what next? See, when we understand certain things at a conceptual level, we need to be, first of all, we need to, let's say I'll talk about psychiatry, and where we use subjective evidence or experience to good effect. We use all information well in clinical assessments, localize psychiatry and train psychiatrists in native nuances, and bring together all those parallel informal mind-related fields. There could be other, for instance, Ayurvedic practitioners may be actually also very good in understanding the whole idea of mind. How do we collaborate with them? That is another thing that we can look at. There may be alternative therapies that are being offered. Does it overlap with psychiatry? Is there something where we can learn together or we can evolve? There are several things to do based on collaborative effort. So I do conduct some mental well-being workshops, and sometimes it is fascinating to see what good work comes out of joint discussions. So I'll leave here for any further discussion or any questions. I'm happy to pick up and answer. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Srinivasa. It was an insightful session, sir. Thank you for sharing this. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. There are no questions as such, but your session been liked by many doctors. So you can log in your library account, you can see it, and you can address them, right?
Okay.
So I would like to thank you on behalf of all the doctors and on behalf of them. And we look forward to host you again in future, sir. Thank you so much
Okay.
for your time.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.